The knife didn't just take pieces of Arman's life, it stripped it bare in one relentless sweep. By 7:14 p.m., he was staring at an email from his boss that began with, "We appreciate your contributions," and ended with a polite severance notice. At 8:03 p.m., his phone lit up with a single-line text from his best friend, "I can't do this anymore." No explanation. No call back. And at 9:27 p.m., he found himself standing in his apartment doorway, watching the woman he thought he'd marry pack the last of her things into a suitcase. She did not cry. She didn't yell. She just closed the door behind her, as if erasing him was the simplest thing in the world. Now, at 2 o'clock in the morning, Arman sat in the dark, cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by the quiet wreckage of a life that had collapsed in hours. No TV. No music. Just the dull hum of the refrigerator and the weight of the silence pressing against his chest. His thoughts drifted towards disappearing, not in a dramatic way, but in the slow, final fade of a man no one would notice was gone. The idea was almost comforting. That's when he heard it. A voice, soft but deliberate, from somewhere just beyond the glow of the street lamp outside his window. "I've been watching you." The words cut through the silence, and Arman's breath stopped. The figure stepped forward, a woman, calm, composed, and looking at him like she'd been waiting for this moment far longer than he could imagine. The woman didn't knock, didn't ask permission, she simply stepped into Arman's apartment as though the space already belonged to her. Up close, she wasn't beautiful in the traditional sense, but there was a precision to her presence, a sharpness in her posture, in her gaze, in the deliberate way she scanned the room. She took in the half-empty whiskey glass, the crumpled shirt on the couch, the pile of unopened mail on the table. "You're at the edge," she said, her tone almost clinical, as if diagnosing him. "One wrong thought. One bad decision. And you disappear." Arman's voice came out hoarse. "Who are you?" Her lips curved into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Someone who knows what you're feeling. And more importantly, someone who knows what to do with it." She introduced herself as Mira, then sat across from him, folding her hands as though they were about to negotiate something monumental. "Pain isn't your enemy," she continued, leaning forward. "It's fuel. You've been bleeding it out, wasting it, letting it rot you from the inside, but it can burn hotter than anything else if you learn how to feed it." Her words unsettled him, yet he felt an odd pull, as though she was speaking a truth he'd always known but never dared to say aloud. Then came the warning. She spoke it like an oath: "If you start, there's no turning back. No halfway. Once it begins, the pain will demand more, and you'll give it." Arman hesitated. Every rational part of him told him to throw her out, to lock the door, to never see her again. But another part, the hollow, aching part, leaned in. "What do I have to do?" he asked. Mira's eyes lit up. "Everything I tell you." The first night of training did not begin with anything Arman expected. There were no motivational speeches, no pep talks, just Mira handing him a black notebook and a pen. "Write down your worst memory," she said. "Every sound. Every smell. Every heartbeat. And don't leave out the parts you don't want to see." It took him a while to start. His hand trembled as he wrote, each word dragging him deeper into the event he had spent years trying to bury. By the time he finished, the page was smudged with sweat from his palm. "That's the first spark," Mira said, flipping the notebook shut. "Now, we feed it." She had him close his eyes and relive the memory, narrating it aloud in brutal detail, the uneven rhythm of his breath, the metallic taste in his mouth, the exact color of the room's shadows. Every time he faltered, she forced him back into it, her voice calm but unyielding. By the second week, the drills intensified. He reenacted confrontations alone in his apartment, shouting into the empty air until his voice broke. Mira made him stand in front of a mirror, speaking truths he'd never dared to admit, his reflection looking back at him like a stranger. And then came the rewrites, taking those same memories and bending them into new versions, ones where he acted instead of froze, struck instead of stumbled. The exercise was intoxicating. Something inside him began to shift. The hollow ache in his chest was filling with something sharper, focus, certainty, a dangerous calm. He spoke with strangers without hesitation. He slept less but woke up more alert. One night, Mira studied him with a faint, unreadable smile. "You're starting to burn," she said softly. "Now, let's see what happens when you turn that fire on the wall." It was a cold Thursday morning when Mira gave Arman his first assignment. She slid a folded slip of paper across the table at the corner cafe, her nails tapping it twice before letting go. "Someone owes you a piece of yourself," she said. "Go take it back." The name on the paper made his pulse spike, a former supervisor who had humiliated him in front of the entire office before firing him. That afternoon, Arman walked into the man's workplace without an appointment, without hesitation. The receptionist tried to stall him, but the confidence in his voice, slow, steady, dangerous, made her back down. He found his target in a glass-walled office, leaning over a desk. When the man looked up, Arman didn't raise his voice or break into a rant. Instead, he shut the door behind him, walked up to the desk, and calmly laid out every detail of what had been done to him, the lies, the sabotage, the final insult. Then, with a precision Mira would have approved of, he turned the words into a weapon. He revealed things he had discovered since. Truths that would make the man squirm in the eyes of his colleagues. By the time Arman left, the man's face was pale, his hands clenched into fists beneath the desk. Arman didn't celebrate. He didn't smile. He simply walked out into the winter air, feeling the strange rush of power running through his veins like adrenaline laced with fire. That evening, he told Mira every detail. She listened without interrupting, but when he was finished, she leaned back in her chair, her gaze fixed on him. The smile she gave him was not proud. It was possession. "You did well," she said, her voice low. "And now, we go bigger." The victories came faster now. A sharp word here, a fearless move there, and people started reacting differently to him. They listened. They backed down. They took him seriously. But somewhere in the rush, something started to slip away. One evening, while making coffee, Arman reached for his phone to call his mother. His thumb hovered over her name in his contacts, and for a heartbeat, he couldn't remember the sound of her voice. The thought didn't just unsettle him, it hollowed him out in a way he couldn't explain. The changes weren't just emotional. He stopped sleeping for more than a few hours at a time, yet never felt tired. His apartment grew colder, emptier, clothes in neat piles, surfaces bare. Old photographs disappeared, replaced by blank space. He had no memory of throwing them away. Mira seemed pleased. "This is what happens when you cut the dead weight," she told him during one of their late-night sessions. "You're making room for who you're becoming." But Arman felt the shift in more intimate ways, the way he could now look into a stranger's eyes for a second too long without blinking, the way he could speak with calm precision even when his heart was pounding. One night, he caught his own reflection in the darkened window. The posture was his. The face was his. But the eyes, they looked like they belonged to someone else entirely. Mira noticed his hesitation. "Don't mourn what's gone," she said softly, almost kindly. "That man was weak. You're not." Arman didn't answer. But for the first time, he wondered what or who was being burned away to keep this fire alive. They were sitting in his apartment, the notebook open between them, when it happened. Mira had been guiding him through another exercise, forcing him to replay the night his relationship ended, drawing out every word, every movement, every fracture in his voice. "You were standing by the window," she said softly, watching her pack the suitcase. The light from the hallway was hitting her left shoulder. She didn't even look back at you when the door clicked shut. Arman froze. His pen stopped mid-stroke. He didn't tell her about the window. He didn't mention the light. His eyes flicked up. Mira was already watching him, as if she'd noticed his pause but chose not to acknowledge it. "You're sleeping," she said calmly, gesturing towards the notebook. "Don't resist. Keep writing." But the words wouldn't come. His chest tightened. He replayed every conversation they'd had, the tiny things she knew about him, the details he couldn't remember sharing. Maybe he had told her. Maybe in his exhaustion, in the haze of drills and confessions, he had given away more than he realized. And yet, something about the way she spoke felt different now. Less like guidance, more like possession. When he pressed her letter, a careful, hesitant question about how she knew so much, Mira didn't flinch. She smiled thinly, closed the notebook, and said, "You told me everything. Even the parts you don't remember." The words were meant to reassure him. Instead, they unsettled him more. Because deep down, he wasn't sure she was lying, and that made it worse. That night, as he lay awake, Arman realized the seed had been planted. Maybe Mira hadn't just found him in his pain. "You're sleeping," she said calmly, gesturing towards the notebook. "Don't resist. Keep writing." But the words wouldn't come. His chest tightened. He replayed every conversation they'd had, the tiny things she knew about him, the details he couldn't remember sharing. Maybe he had told her. Maybe in his exhaustion, in the haze of drills and confessions, he had given away more than he realized. And yet, something about the way she spoke felt different now. Less like guidance, more like possession. When he pressed her letter, a careful, hesitant question about how she knew so much, Mira didn't flinch. She smiled thinly, closed the notebook, and said, "You told me everything. Even the parts you don't remember." The words were meant to reassure him. Instead, they unsettled him more. Because deep down, he wasn't sure she was lying, and that made it worse. That night, as he lay awake, Arman realized the seed had been planted. Maybe Mira hadn't just found him in his pain. Coincidences. Too many to ignore. The deeper he dug, the more the coincidences aligned like a puzzle snapping into place. And when he cross-checked dates, the day his boss turned against him, the week his friend began to pull away, the exact night of the breakup, Mira's presence loomed close every time. The final blow came from an overlooked memory. He replayed the night his relationship ended, this time not through Mira's exercises, but through his own raw recollection. In the corner of his mind, he saw it clearly now, the shadow at the end of the street, a figure standing beneath the flickering lamp as his ex walked away. The figure had been watching. It had been her. His chest tightened, his hands trembling as he shoved the old photos and documents aside. The destruction of his life had not been chance. It hadn't even been cruel fate. It was designed. And Mira was the architect. Arman didn't wait for Mira to come to him. He went to her. It was past midnight when he found her in the abandoned warehouse she often used for their sessions, a cavernous place lit only by a single hanging bulb that cast long, skeletal shadows on the walls. She was already there, waiting, as if she'd known he would come. "You orchestrated it," he said, his voice low, shaking with fury. "All of it. My job. My friend. Ha. You were there before everything fell apart. You made it happen." Mira did not deny it. She didn't even blink. Instead, she tilted her head, studying him with the same unnerving calm she always carried. "And look at you now," she said softly. "Do you see what you've become because of it?" Arman's fist tightened. "You destroyed my life." "I freed you," she countered, stepping closer, her eyes locked on his. "Do you really believe you would have clawed your way out of your mediocrity on your own? You needed the pain. I gave it to you." He shook his head, but she kept pressing, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "You think you'd be standing here, a stronger, sharper, unstoppable, if I hadn't broken you first? No, Arman. You'd still be nothing." The words struck deeper than any insult could. Because a part of him, the dark and trembling part, believed her. For the first time, he saw the bars of the cage he had willingly stepped into, and the horrifying truth that every triumph he'd claimed had been built on a foundation she had engineered. Mira reached out, her hand grazing his shoulder in what almost felt like tenderness. "The pain made you," she murmured. "And it still can. But only if you let me take you further." Arman stood frozen, torn between rage and the terrible allure of her certainty. He had come here to break free, yet her words tightened around him like chains. The warehouse was silent except for the buzzing hum of the single light bulb overhead. Arman's chest rose and fell in jagged rhythm, his mind split in two, one side screaming to run. The other tethered to Mira's voice like it was the only sound that mattered. She circled him slowly, her footsteps echoing against the concrete. "You've tasted it," she said. "The power. The certainty. The fire that comes only when you let pain consume you. And you've seen how it changes you. No hesitation. No weakness. Her eyes glimmered in the dim light, sharp and unblinking. But here's the truth, Arman, the fire doesn't stop. Once you ignite it, it keeps burning. It will hollow you out, strip away everything soft, until you are something more than human, or nothing at all. Arman clenched his fists. His body felt wired, almost electric, but underneath the strength was exhaustion, not of the muscles, but of the soul. Mira stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that pressed against his ear. You have only two choices. Burn, until there's nothing left of the man you are. Or stop. And face the emptiness you've been running from all along. Her words lingered in the air, sharp as broken glass. Arman closed his eyes. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he saw both paths, one where he became something terrifying and untouchable, then one where he collapsed into the void he had been avoiding since the night everything shattered. When he opened his eyes, Mira was waiting, her hand outstretched. Choose, she said simply. The silence stretched. His throat tightened. He realized, with a strange calm, that either path could destroy him. Arman didn't take Mira's hand. He stared at it, then at her face, the certainty in her eyes, the hunger disguised as guidance. For a long moment, the silence between them was unbearable, stretched thin like a wire ready to snap. Then he turned and walked away. Mira didn't follow. She only smiled, certain he would come back. They always did. The fire she had lit in him was too addictive to resist. Sooner or later, he would burn again, and when he did, she would be waiting. But Arman didn't return. Days passed. Weeks. His apartment was found empty, stripped bare of everything personal, as if the man who had lived there had been erased. No trace of him lingered, no photographs, no clothes, not even the notebook Mira had given him. For the first time, a doubt crept into Mira's certainty. She began to search quietly, methodically, but each lead dissolved into nothing. It was as though Arman had learned her game and vanished off the board entirely. Then, one night, as she returned to her warehouse, she found a single envelope waiting on the center of the floor. No stamp, no seal, just her name written in stark black ink. Inside was a slip of paper with 8 words written in his unmistakable hand, I'm using my pain. But not for you. Mira stared at it for a long time, her hand trembling ever so slightly. And then, for the first time in years, she realized what she had created, not a disciple, not a vessel. But something she couldn't control. The fire didn't go out. It had simply left her.